Good evening, dear friends. I am your headmister, Stefan Gearhart.
And I am your co-mister, the man with no name, Lance Wayne.
And we are the Misters of the Dark.
Join us as we discuss everything from horror books, films,
and even pretty princesses. Join us every other Tuesday in our dilapidated mansion. You never know what's going to happen next.
Only on the Fearscape Media Network.
That's a good laugh.
Fearscape Media Network. Exploring the unknown. One podcast at a time.
Welcome to Wishful Drinking and Binge Thinking. This is your host, Morticia Linklater. That's right. Welcome to the special October spooky season edition of Wishful Drinking and Binge Thinking. I have been drinking a few of these thingies that are called poison apple cocktails. And I'm sure there's a more responsible ratio out there, but I have been doing equal parts Fireball, cranberry juice, and apple cider with a little bit of grenadine and some gold edible glitter. It's so fucking pretty. And delicious. I feel like Martha Stewart, since I just gave you a damn Pinterest board drink for your spooky season. So try it out because it's so good. This is like my favorite time of year because it's not balls hot anymore, but it's not like dig your car out of the snow cold. And also Halloween, obviously. It's a holiday that's just you doing your thing and having fun and dressing up and being whoever you want to be and eating so much candy. Yeah. So I think it's the best time of year. And what makes it interesting is that scary stuff is in. People like scary, which is so weird, isn't it? Why do we like scary? That's the topic of today's episode. We're going to talk about fear and what it does in your brain and body and why we kind of like it a little bit, which is like, it doesn't make sense and I can't think of the word that I want. So I'm in control of this. I'm going to pause and think of that word and come back in 3, 2, 1. Counterintuitive. That's the word I was trying to think of, and I am embarrassed at how long it took me to come up with it during that pause. It was actually probably only about 15 seconds, but it felt longer because I felt like a dum-dum for a second. It's counterintuitive that our brains and our bodies don't want fear to happen, but that we kind of like it. Why? Like scary movies. Why do we like scary movies? They scare us. That's so counterintuitive, right? Let's delve into that shit. So, like, in our brains when we encounter something that we're afraid of. So our senses gather all of the information about the thing. And then that activates our amygdala. Or like, there's two of them. So amygdala. I don't like that. So I'm just going to say amygdala. Because that's fun to say. I fucking love it. So the amygdala is known as being like the fear center of the brain. It's not all it does. It's like those strong emotions generate there. And fear is one of them. And when that fear response happens, a bunch of other junk in your body happens too. So, like, your limbic system is activated along with your hippocampus. No, hypothalamus. Hypothalamus regulates the fight or flight response. It's part of the limbic system. You can listen to all of that in my previous episode 3. The one with the Woody Allen title. I should maybe start naming my episodes things that have more to do with the episodes so you know which one to listen to. Well, it's too late. What's done is done. We're going to keep on this trend with whatever weird junk I say. So fight or flight happens. Limbic system. And then whatever that scary sensory information is gets coded into our prefrontal cortex. And it's like memory consolidation. So basically, let's do an example. If you're a little kid and you're playing with a dog and that dog attacks you, then your amygdala is gonna spike. It's gonna activate the limbic system. It's going to basically channel that information to your prefrontal cortex and store it somewhere. So now that every time you see a dog, that memory is gonna pop up and remind you that, hey, dogs can be dangerous. You should be kind of scared. And then that's how some people develop phobias. That's a very specific fear because the whole fear system in your brain has coded that information to mean scary, scary, scary. And you know what? Later in the episode, I'll talk about ways of overcoming fears and phobias, or some of the methods that are used. But right now, we're going to focus on what's still happening in the brain. So there's a bunch of shit going on with the neurotransmitters. And God, that's interesting as hell. I love talking about neurotransmitters. So basically, when you're afraid, oh man, your adrenal glands are going to release cortisol, and your epinephrine is going to go, and all kinds of shit's going to happen in your body. Your blood pressure is going to rise, and you're going to start getting sweaty and cold, and you're going to have changes in your digestion because, like, if you're getting chased by a lion, then you don't have time to use the bathroom or anything. So your body shuts down all the functions that are not necessary when it comes to running or fighting and stuff. So your muscles also get to, like, I don't know, like trembling because they're ready to go. They're getting all these chemicals pumped through them because they're ready to run. That whole limbic system thing, your heart rate's going up, your breath gets faster. You have like a shortness of breath. Like all the things you would associate with a panic attack or something like that. That's what happens when you get scared. And it's just the physiological response that your body has to all the chemicals that are coursing through it because your amygdala is like, yo, you should be afraid of this shit. And this is what fear is and what it feels like. So basically, our bodies don't want to be afraid. So why does our brains be all like, but fear is fun sometimes? That's what spooky season's all about. And why do some of us love it so much? Hang on, baby birds, I'll feed you. After that sip. So, I love scary movies. I do. I think they're hilarious for the most part. And there's a reason that some people find them funny and others don't. And I'll get into that. But there are different kinds of fear when it comes to scary movies, because there are unrealistic ones. Things with like aliens or supernatural creatures where we're pretty positive these things don't exist, so we can separate ourselves from them, and they're a little less scary because we can point out how unreal they are. Then there are more like psychological thriller type things like Silence of the Lambs. That kind of shit can happen, and that makes us more unsettled, and we feel a little more fear with those more realistic scenarios. And then there's just like the slasher things. Sure, there might be a rando slasher out there somewhere, but we're pretty sure we're not going to be in that situation. Excuse me. And for most people, that is true. So, we enjoy watching these kinds of movies because mostly we get a chemical rush from it. So, I already mentioned that the amygdala sparks the limbic system. That means it throws out a whole bunch of chemicals to get our body pumping. Like, we're ready for fight or flight. We're ready to go. So we have all of these chemicals inside of us that's just making us feel challenged. Like, we need to deal with this thing in front of us. I'm going to start off talking about brain chemicals because I always find that to be the most compelling argument for the way things are being the way they are. Yeah. So we got all this cortisol raging through our system along with all of the epinephrine. And we're watching the scary movie and these things are scaring us and all those chemicals are being released. But actually, you know what else is being released? Some dopamine and other shit. And once the norepinephrine comes in to calm down the epinephrine and like everything settles back down, you know what's still lingering there? The fucking dopamine. So, like, fear spikes all of these chemicals in our brain, but when things settle down and our thinking brain, not our evolutionary brain, which the amygdala is part of, realizes that it's safe and that we don't need to run away or fight anything, the chemicals that are left over are the happy chemicals. We have survived. We have prospered. And we have dopamine that makes us feel all giddy because we got through something scary. And I think that's a pretty good argument for why a lot of people like scary movies. Some people might like scary movies because it helps them prepare for the worst. Like, our brains, they hope for the best, but they plan for the worst. It's kind of their job. It's what they do. But if they're presented with an idea that needs a solution, they're going to try to solve it. That's why, even though it's unrealistic, you get people that make like zombie apocalypse plans. Like, oh, I'm going to have this bunker filled with this much food, and these are going to be my weapons, and this is where I'm going to hold up. I'm going to go to a mall because I'm totally unoriginal, and I saw Dawn of the Dead once when I was 12. And, like, just, it gives you a sense of control to feel like you have an idea of what you might do in that one particular scenario that is happening in that horror movie. And when you don't have control over a lot of things in your life, it's nice to have control over one thing. Even if that one thing is stupid, like a zombie contingency plan, all you weird people with bunkers. Get a life. So, along with that sense of control over the unknown or situations you might be uncertain about, it might also give you a feeling of control over the things that are already present in your life. Like, if you're already a super anxious person, like if you've got generalized anxiety disorder and you're anxious about a shit ton of stuff, learning how to cope with the momentary fear that a horror movie provides could boost the tools you have in coping with your everyday fear. So it's kind of like a practice makes perfect sort of thing. If you have anxiety and you keep practicing by putting yourself in situations, aka watching horror movies, then you start to learn ways to cope with anxiety in everyday life. Probably not one of the most popular theories as to why people like horror movies, but I think it's a legitimate option. I'm sure there's a lot you can learn from horror movies, even if it is just how to, I don't know, keep your anxiety at a manageable level while trying to remain calm on the outside. Some people could find it pretty helpful, so fucking use it. Use everything in your toolkit. I don't care how it makes you look or feel. If it works, do it. Some people think that horror also kind of lets you get out some of your darker thoughts or urges, because some of the movies you can really put yourself in the bad guy's place, like a slasher movie or Carrie, or anybody that gets to live out something you may have fantasized about, like how Carrie was getting on all of her bullies, or how, all the popular kids at school or camp or whatever were getting murdered as hell by slashers and whatnot. So some people think that it gives you an opportunity to kind of halfway experience what it feels like to get that revenge or justice that you crave, because sometimes we are empathetic toward the bad guy or the killer. I mean, shit. You ever seen that show Hannibal? Oh my god. Like, most of the time you want Hannibal to succeed, to kill people, to not get caught, to have a BFF in Will Graham. Like, it gives you an opportunity to feel what they feel. Humans are empathetic creatures, so we get to put ourselves in this situation where, you finally have power over something that has been an authority over you. And that's kind of a Freudian explanation, but you know what? It's not totally untrue. Freud was a total hack, but he had some good points, okay? Or at least the concepts behind those points made a little bit of sense. I mean, it wasn't all about doing cocaine and wanting to fuck your parents. I don't know anybody that's true of. Oh, I need another drink. Okay. It also makes us feel like we're survivors. When we finish the movie, when those credits roll, we succeeded. We got through something scary. You know, congratulations to us. We did it. We get a sense of accomplishment from that. And some scientists suggest that that feeling of accomplishment, that we've conquered something, that we've conquered our fear of whatever was in that movie, the dopamine and satisfaction and everything that we get from that sense of accomplishment makes us keep watching horror movies because, you know, we're the master. We've mastered something. We are the winners. We are conquering everything. Because, oh shit, were we scared when we went in, but when we came out, we weren't scared anymore. That's for babies. We're big, strong people that can handle anything. Anything. Got it? Good. Okay. Final thing I'll talk about for reasons we might like scary movies. And that's because we watch them with somebody. That's right. When you have that whole chemical cocktail in your brain of all of the dopamine and adrenaline and all of that, then you actually feel closer to someone afterwards. So, I fucking love this study they did. So there was this study where they put this girl in front of a bridge, like this rickety old bridge over a super high cavern, crevice, a big drop. And so they put this girl in front of it, and people rated her attractiveness, and they were like, she aight. But then when they placed her on the other side of the bridge, and people had to cross it to get to her, their adrenaline spiked over that rickety ass bitch, and when they got to the other side, they rated her as more attractive and were more likely to ask her out because they associated her with that relief of making it over the bridge in one piece. So, like, when you watch a horror movie with someone else and the credits roll and you made it through and nothing bad happened to you and it was all on a screen and it wasn't real, and you get that sense of relief and that other person is there, damn it, dude, that's a one-way ticket to BoneTown, because like your brain says, yeah, we're safe, this is awesome, and this person helped make me through this scenario that was never real to begin with. So, you know, we like horror movies sometimes because they make us feel closer to people. And it's not always sexual or romantic. Like, if you go to the movies with your friends, when you walk out of the theater together, you have that feeling, that camaraderie, that you've all survived together, and you feel an attachment to them because you did it together. So yeah, there are a lot of different reasons why people can enjoy horror movies. Some people view them as funny rather than scary because humor is their coping mechanism. So people who use humor as coping have that sense of mastery because they feel like they've bested the situation and they ain't afraid of no ghosts. And, you know, they've laughed their way through it. They have that sense of mastery and they can say, I wasn't scared. Even though their brain technically was scared, it just used laughter as a coping mechanism for the fear, which means that their prefrontal cortex did not store the information within the movie as anything fearful that they needed to be wary of in the future. Okay, so we talked a little bit about fear and what happens in your brain when you're afraid and why sometimes we kind of like fear. So let's talk about what you actually do if fear is a for reals issue for you. Okay, so there are a couple different treatments for fears and phobias. There's exposure therapy and there's flooding. And the difference between these is, I would say, subtle because they involve the same shit, but it's not subtle. It's a difference talking in a. So flooding is just when you throw someone into the deep end of the pool with their fear. If someone is afraid of snakes, you Indiana Jones that shit. You throw them into a goddamn pit full of snakes. Oh, it's bad. It doesn't usually work. I mean, it works with some people because when they're in the pit, they realize maybe this wasn't as bad as I thought it was. You know, unless you actually got some poisonous snakes in there, in which case you're a horrible psychological expert when it comes to flooding. So it's, I think they usually also call it in vivo exposure therapy. So it's kind of just saying nut up or shut up. You know, throw you into the deep end and see what happens. I wouldn't recommend it. But then you've got exposure therapy, which is a little better. So if someone has that same fear of snakes, you'd start them off slow until you work your way up to snakes. So first, depending on how severe the phobia, let's say it's the most severe, you say something like, snakes. Snakes. You just get them used to hearing the word snakes. So they're not even, you know, flinching or anything when they hear the word snakes. Then maybe you show them a picture of a worm. It's not a snake, but it's similar. That fucking annelid and its belly squirming leglessness. So the person gets used to seeing a picture of a worm. Then you show them a picture of a snake. And they realize, oh, it's just a picture. It's not going to hurt me. It's fine to look at. So then you show them a real worm. And it's squirmy and weird. And they don't like being around it. But they get used to it. And then maybe, just maybe, you have them touch the worm. Yeah, just touch it. Let it squirm around in their hand a little bit. Let it move around and let them feel that being a legless freak isn't awful. It's just a different kind of organism on the face of this planet. So once they get used to that worm, then you maybe take them to the pet store and let them look around at the snake section. Maybe not the whole section, just a snake. One snake. A little snake. A little danger noodle. A little nope rope. And just don't touch it. Don't look at it too long. Just be near the terrarium. and take a few quick peeks. And then once they get to the point where they're comfortable looking at the snake, maybe they can touch it. And then eventually maybe they can hold it. And then it's not like they're getting a pet snake or anything, but they can walk around in their day-to-day lives not fearing snakes because they know, I've seen a snake, I've touched a snake, I've held a snake. It's not that bad. I'm not that scared of it anymore. Because a snake is a snake, and snakes aren't bad snakes. They're just snakes. Say snake again. Snake. Now, exposure therapy is probably the most recommended form of therapy for specific phobias. But if it's like a general fear of things in life and the world, you're probably better off just going with cognitive behavioral therapy. And if you haven't already, I would urge you to listen to my first 2 episodes, which discussed mainly the cognitive distortions that are generally attacked, kind of attacked, really questioned, and hopefully will provide you with alternative thought processes to replace those cognitive distortions. So listen to my first 2 episodes if you haven't already, and you can learn a little bit more about CBT. Well, I think specifically I was doing REBT, but it's pretty much the same thing, except there's more cursing in REBT, which is why I like it more. Now, when fear goes too far and becomes trauma, like PTSD type shit, then you need something way more extensive than exposure therapy. You need some EMDR and shit like that. And that's that. I categorize trauma as something totally different than just fear. So I think you need to figure out whether what you're feeling is fear or if it's generalized anxiety or if it's trauma. And then that will tell you the type of treatment that is correct for you. So, to recap, people like to be a little afraid sometimes. And that's okay, because our brain likes feeling that flood of chemicals that comes when it feels that relief that we aren't actually in any danger. And what better time of year to do that than spooky season going into Halloween? BT dubs, like totally off topic, but if you need a good recommendation for a book or audiobook, A Head Full of Ghosts by Paul Tremblay. Best thing I've read this year. Or listened to, actually. I've got a long commute to work now, so I listened to the audiobook. And, it's rare to find a book that friggin' good, psychological thriller style, that also has a really good person reading it. I don't know who that bitch was, but, she did the voices, and she got all the inflections exactly as I would do them in my head. So, top-notch audiobook and or book there, depending on which method you take in your stories. Yes, fear can be kind of fun sometimes, but sometimes it's not. So when fear is not fun and it's something that hinders your daily existence, like a specific phobia, get treatment for that shit. Get exposure therapy if it's a phobia. If it is anxiety, do some CBT. If it is PTSD, do either CBT or EMDR, preferably EMDR, although it is much harder to find someone who specializes in that than any other rando who does CBT and throws it out like candy. Yeah, spooky season's fun times. Enjoy it while it's here. if things are scarier for you, get some help. Or live your entire life afraid of snakes. I don't give a shit. Maybe you live in a city and you will never encounter a snake. So who gives a shit if you do have a phobia of them? It's your life. Do what you want to do. Yeah. Basically what I'm saying is, enjoy the scary season. Enjoy the rush of chemicals that you get in your brain when you watch some scary movies. And if you avoid scary movies, then maybe your brain is just a little more advanced than everyone else's, because it knows that the best way to keep all of your chemicals and brain functions operating properly is to not even try to trick it into thinking it's scared in the first place. Everybody do your thing and just be happy with what you're doing. This is Morticia Linklater signing off. I hope you have a very happy Halloween, and I will see you all around Thanksgiving times. Shout out to the Fearscape Media Network. They are about to start a, I don't know, like newspaper sort of thing. It will be released on November 1st. So I will be sure to provide information for that whenever it is available. And as always, peace out.